This is Bean to Barstool, a podcast that looks at the intersections of craft chocolate, craft beer, and other artisan drinks. My name is David Nilsson. I'm a professional drinks writer, an advanced cicerone, the author of Pairing Beer and Chocolate, and the creator and host of this show. The music for this episode is by my dear friend, indie folk musician Anna P.S. You can find out more about Anna's music in the show notes or on annapsmusic.com. You can find links and information about our guests in the show notes as well. I hope you enjoy this episode of Bean to Barstool. Hey everyone, a couple months back I reached out to Front Porch Chocolate in Montana to introduce my Pairing Beer and Chocolate book and see if they were interested in stocking that. And I was thrilled to hear back from them that they had not only already gotten the book, but had used it to develop several bars for beer and chocolate pairings with local breweries. So naturally, I had to talk more with them about that, and today we're going to hear from owners Greg and T, the married couple behind Front Porch. First, a bit of housekeeping. If you love Bean to Barstool, you can help more people discover the show by leaving a review on your favorite podcast service. It's quick and really does actually help me out, so I'd be super grateful if you did that. Also, as always, check out our online shop at beantobarstool.com to pick up a copy of my book, as well as a bunch of other cool beer and chocolate zines, including the new issue of Final Gravity issue 8. The results of the Craft Chocolate Challenge were recently released, and big congrats to all the winners there. Notable on there was Encore Coffee and Chocolate taking silver overall for their vanilla latte bar, which won the best white chocolate category as well. I wrote a blog post about Encore's coffee bars recently, so you can read more about the process and spirit behind those on the site. Also, Blind Cat, Burnt Fork Bend, and Vitals all won medals, and I must confess I have not had bars from any of them, so I need to check those out. You can find all the winners on the Craft Chocolate Challenge Instagram account. That's at craft_chocolate without an E, so like chocolat _challenge. So craft_chocolate_challenge, no E on the chocolate. I've got a listener question to answer before we get into our interview today. Jorge Torres, who is a pro sponsor of ours on Patreon, asked how, in my experience, the craft chocolate community feels different from the craft beer community. And this is a great question because part of the thesis of this podcast and the blog is that these two industries and subcultures have more in common than they have in difference. So there are so many things that are echoed on both sides. As far as the things that feel different in the cultures of these two industries, I think chocolate still has a little bit more of a DIY feel to it than craft beer has right now. Craft beer is in a tough spot. The market is not super friendly. We're seeing more closures than we are openings right now, and sales have slowed way down. And so there's a lot of talk in the craft beer space right now on this being a business first and foremost, and kind of dropping some of the starry-eyed naivete with which maybe some of these breweries were opened originally, and getting down to making hard decisions from a business standpoint. Certainly, to some degree, that's true of any kind of business, even the smallest chocolate business. But even the smallest brewery is bigger than most craft chocolate makers. The barrier to entry in terms of selling chocolate commercially is lower. You can do this almost as a side business, and I'm not necessarily saying you can make a lot of money doing that, or that you don't need to consider a chocolate business being a business, but because of that difference in terms of the scales of production, craft chocolate still has kind of more of a DIY feel to it, and I think that's echoed in the fandom a little bit around it. There's more of an access right now for craft chocolate fans to be able to interface with craft chocolate makers, whereas craft brewers are pretty stressed out right now. There's a little difference in the way that things feel with them. Also, one big difference is around the consumption of these products. Beer is looked at very much as a communal experience. And while you can certainly enjoy a beer at home on your own while you're watching a movie or sitting on the patio or whatever it is, the the heartbeat of craft beer culture is in the tap room or in the bar or even at festivals where you're communally enjoying this beverage, where chocolate really doesn't have an equivalent to that. I mean, there are certainly, you can go to craft chocolate shops and taste chocolate there, and especially if they have some kind of cafe, that can be part of it, but we really don't have much of an organized consumption and experience culture around chocolate. It is something that's understood you're going to have at home, or at most maybe with a couple friends at home or something like that. I think chocolate is more inherently intimate, for better or worse. That's kind of the imagery around it, whether it's just a private indulgence that you're giving yourself a treat of tasting chocolate during your day or something, or as a gift, of friendship, of romance, of whatever it is. There's kind of this intimate feel around chocolate, and it's a little tough to overcome that. And from a format standpoint, it's tough to figure out how to make chocolate communal in that way. We have, tasting events, and there are chocolate festivals, but I think that's the biggest difference in how personally my enjoyment of these two things differs, and how I see that reflected out in the broader culture, is that chocolate is still something that happens primarily privately, and we don't kind of have a communal aspect to it except for our online conversation around this. So I think that's one of the biggest differences in how these two things feel right now. All right, now let's get to our conversation with Greg and T at Front Porch Chocolate. They start out by telling us the story of how the company got its charming name.
We named it Front Porch because we love the front porch, very simply. We had our first sale off of our front porch, and we came up with the idea for Front Porch while, believe it or not, sitting on the front porch.
I forget what we were doing exactly when we kind of decided to launch the business idea, but we were just enjoying some beers on our porch and talking about what we like to do and dreaming up some ideas and talking about Greg's love for chocolate and chocolate making as a hobby. And we were thinking of names, and I was like, Greg, what do you like to do? That's what we should name it. And he said, I like sitting on the front porch.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we like what it embodied. We liked that it was a place that you could go and kind of pull away from everything. We felt like chocolate, especially good craft chocolate, did that. It kind of pulled you away from whether it was your perception of chocolate, or it pulled you away from your life a little bit, because the flavors are much more astounding, and they can kind of stop you in your tracks a little bit. And so we wanted to infuse the idea and like the culture of front porch and front porch sitting and front porch hanging out into the chocolate that we made and shared.
I love that. One of the beer sites that I write for is named Porch Drinking, and it's got the same kind of idea. So I love that. And what
Yes.
year was that you were getting started?
2021, the fall of 2021, we had our first front porch sale, and spring of 2022 is when we officially became a living, breathing, functioning business.
We signed some
We
papers.
signed papers.
There you go. Made it legal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you get into chocolate making?
That's a Greg. It's a Greg question.
I worked in coffee for a long time, and one of the early coffee shops I worked at was in Boulder, Colorado. And the chocolate shop I worked at, or the coffee shop I worked at, sold Ritual Chocolate,
Hmm.
who at the time was based in Boulder. And they sold single origin, 70% dark chocolate. We also roasted and sold single origin coffee, so I was very, familiar with that. So I had never seen single origin chocolate before, and I remember buying a Peru bar next to, I think, Guatemala, and then there was I can't remember what else they were selling, but it was the first exposure that I'd had to single origin chocolate, and I was like blown away. I thought it was the coolest thing because I loved the idea of single origin coffee, and I was like, wow, this is so cool. And then later on in my life, I mean, I kind of like forgot about it, but then later on in my life, I started getting into making Christmas presents for my family. I wanted to just hand make them instead of purchase anything from the store. And one year I needed to make a particularly good present. And so I decided I would make chocolate for my grandmother because she needed a good present that year. and went to the store. I was looking on Chocolate Alchemy's website and like very lightly perusing the internet and went to the store. I bought some cocoa nibs from the bulk section and then blasted them in my NutriBullet with some sugar and called it chocolate and poured it in some molds that were like the shape of a letter that I gave my grandmother. So I gave her a G for Gammy, and my other family members got it too. It was just like this very rudimentary, very rustic, very average tasting chocolate, and I was hooked. I thought it was cool, and ended up buying Dandelion's Making Chocolate book. Started purchasing equipment, and it's just like I think so many chocolate makers' stories. It just sprouts legs and gets away from you, and then all of a sudden you have a chocolate business.
Yeah, for sure. Very
Yeah.
similar to home brewing in that way, I think.
Yeah.
Where do you
Yeah.
source your cacao from now?
We pretty much exclusively get our beans from Meridian Cacao Company. We get some beans from Uncommon Cacao, but for the most part, we source from Meridian and Uncommon.
All right, so you were sitting on your front porch drinking beer when this idea came to you. What do you both think of beer? What are your favorite styles? What's your background with craft beer?
Oh gosh, what do we think of beer? We love beer. Obviously, all pretty much all types of beer. We don't really discriminate. I can guess that we were probably drinking a light beer that night on the porch when we decided, probably just a Miller Lite or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, our experience with like beer is just being lovers of it, loving to go to local breweries everywhere and try what they have, get flights of beer places and just talk about it and yeah, try it. I really love sour beer. That's kind of my style of choice. I love anything sour. I'm Filipino, which in the Filipino food culture, there's a lot of like sour food, souring agents. So that's like always a flavor I just really have gravitated towards, and it is delicious for sour. I love sour beers. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think early on when we were making chocolate, I remember like I made chocolate and then we had cracked open a Miller High Life and I was like, oh my God, beer and chocolate. No way. And this is before we knew anything about you,
Yeah.
David. And obviously like Miller High Life was just the tip of the iceberg. But it did introduce this idea. I mean, it's the champagne of beers, of course, but it did introduce the idea of, well, it introduced the idea of breaking the mold away from wine and chocolate, which, you know,
Has its place.
it has its place, but it's not our favorite. But like the bubbles, we loved the bubbles, and we loved the just a different experience it could introduce. So I remember we were in Philly seeing some of T's friends, and we were at a bar, and we brought our chocolate, and we were just drinking like Miller High Lifes at this bar, and we were eating chocolate, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, what the heck?"
That's awesome. Do you remember what
Yeah.
bars you brought?
Oh gosh. I think they were just a 70% single origin, just two ingredient dark chocolate bars that we had made. I think we were getting our beans from Vietnam at the time or Mexico.
Oh yeah, both of those.
Um, that neither of which we use anymore, not because we don't want to, but
Yeah.
we just don't buy them. But yeah, I mean, it's funny thinking about that now because I would never choose to pair a 70% two ingredient dark chocolate with a Miller High Life now.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was like groundbreaking enough to do that,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, we can certainly get a little bit too fussy when it comes to pairing because it's just fun to pair, even if something doesn't come out being magical. It's just fun to
It's
try
just
things
fun.
together. Yeah.
It's a hoot.
Yeah,
It's a hoot.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, just trying anything with chocolate, like any sorts of beverages or other like little snacks that you have. It's just fun to taste things together
Yeah.
and be like, "Ew, that was like not good. Oh, I'll try something else."
Right.
Doesn't
Yeah.
turn you off from the experience.
Yeah.
Just
There certainly are plenty of those,
yeah,
those combinations.
yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about pairing then. You sent a number of very good bars my way a couple weeks ago, and I've had a chance to taste through those. You sent some of your own pairing recommendations with those of what you've paired them with. And I kind of looked at some of my own ideas for those. I'd love to just walk through some of those bars, talk about the development of the bar itself, and then just discuss some pairings a little bit. I was looking at the strawberry and lemon white chocolate bar, which is visually beautiful and, very, very bright. And tell us a little bit about the idea behind that bar and what went into developing that flavor concept.
Well, all these bars were developed as part of an event that we did with Mountains Walking Brewery in Bozeman, which for listeners, we are in Bozeman, Montana. Or actually, we're in Livingston, Montana, but we're in Montana. The chocolate, we decided to do these beer and chocolate pairings. We had a friend that was a GM at the brewery at the time and suggested doing it. And I think around that time, T had picked up your zine and was interested in what you were promoting and talking about in terms of pairing. And so our very first event, the first chocolate that we did in the flight was a milk chocolate with lime and sea salt. And we paired it with a Japanese style lager.
Sure.
The goal was to recreate like a Corona and lime.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of, we started thinking about that, introduced the idea of citrus, that you could, take something like a lager, in this case, like a rice lager, and then introduce a little bit a hit of citrus, and it would just like elevate the whole experience. So when we did the second one, we wanted to do something that was, a white chocolate, so it was a little sweeter and had that milky background or like a creamy background, but then it hit you with that citrus. So when you took a sip of the lager, you were like hit in the face with this like lemon, and it was this very like refreshing, almost like summery, experience having the two of them together. So we just like the lightness and the freshness of it. And we were talking, we were like, oh, this is great. It's kind of like like strawberry lemon pound cake. And we were thinking about, we try to like inject a lot of nostalgia into everything we do and try to make it be memorable. Have you drawn previous experiences? So we're like, oh, what if, sitting at grandma's table and she's just made a lemon pound cake, and that's kind of like the experience we wanted to recreate with that pairing.
Very cool. What cocoa butter do you use when you're making your white chocolate bars?
So that one, I mean, it changes, and sourcing cocoa butter is a
challenge right now.
Yeah.
Unique at this moment. That one was a Peru that we got from Meridian, and just really balanced, super fragrant. Loved that it complemented the citrus and the strawberries really well in that one.
We'll be right back.
Are you a craft beer enthusiast interested in learning about the San Diego beer scene? Join the hosts of the Capital of Craft podcast, brought to you by the San Diego Brewers Guild, where they explore the unique culture and innovation that defines San Diego's craft beer community. Hosted by Eric Fowler, Executive Director of the San Diego Brewers Guild, and Jeff Fox of Beer Media Co., this podcast offers a look into the trends, challenges, and stories that shape the local brewing community. From sustainable brewing practices to hop trends and navigating the complex world of brewery regulations, their episodes shine a light on the industry professionals behind San Diego's renowned beers. Whether you're a longtime industry professional or just a passionate beer enthusiast, their conversations offer fresh perspectives and valuable insights into what makes San Diego a true capital of craft beer. Subscribe to the Capital of Craft podcast on your favorite platform today and follow them on Instagram at SD Brewers. That's SD as in San Diego, at SD Brewers. Get ready to explore the flavors, stories, and craftsmanship that make San Diego's beer scene truly unique. Cool. So in the pairing you did, you used their Powder City lager. I assume that's just kind of like a classic American style lager.
Yep.
Cool. And how did that pairing work in the event?
Like, how well did it work, or how did it?
Yeah. How do you feel like it ended up playing out when you paired them together?
Oh, it's alchemy.
Yeah, there is something really nice about the Powder City lager. It has like a bit of that like orange, warm winter spices.
Mm.
And that was really elevated with the lemon flavor that we had in that strawberry lemon pound cakey white chocolate flavor we were going for. So yeah, it created more of that, like Greg was saying, more of that citrusy flavor where kind of like the lemon and the orange kind of met. And it almost wasn't like it was like distinctly lemon, distinctly orange, but there was just like that kind of something else of a citrus flavor in there. So yeah, we really loved how that kind of created that new flavor out of
Yeah,
it.
and we did it first in the lineup too, and it really just like blew people out of the water, which was awesome. And a lot of people reported that that was their favorite pairing, and it was approachable. It wasn't too crazy, It was really refreshing, and people could kind of go back and forth between the two. We really liked that one because it almost created this like mouth-watering experience, so you could just keep bouncing back and forth, and it wasn't overwhelming in any capacity.
Yeah, I could see that working really well with a lager that has a little bit of like an herbal or floral hop character too, because you're kind of creating a triangle then between that citrus acidity, the
Mhm.
herbal character, and then that little bit sweeter, gentler fruitiness with the strawberry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. I would be curious to try this with a Belgian pale ale, something that has a little bit of fermentation character under it. Then you're
Mm,
kind of bringing in a little bit banana with the strawberry
Yeah.
as well.
cool.
The risk there, I think, would be that there might be a little bit too much bitterness on the hop side, which can work in really weird ways with
Totally.
acidity in the chocolate. I have paired bars with lemon with richer beers that have cherry in them to balance those against each other. Something like Troeg's Mad Elf. I don't know if you guys get
Oh
Troeg's
yeah.
all the way out there. Does it make it to Montana?
It doesn't, but I've had trogs. I'm originally from the Philadelphia area, so
Oh,
we
okay, cool.
a lot of
Yeah, so
trogs there.
their Mad Elf is a Belgian dark strong ale that has a small amount of cherry in it. It's not
Okay.
overwhelming, but just enough to give it a little bit of a fruity tartness. And I could see that working potentially well. It's a very strong beer. It's like 10,
Yeah.
11%. So
Wow.
it might override some of the more subtle flavors in the bar, but I'd be curious to see how that acidity with the fruit balanced out.
Yeah, it's it's neat to hear you, kind of talking about these other beers because we went into this with one brewery. I mean, our friend was the GM and so he set it up and we've become really good friends with the owners of the brewery. And so it's been a very nice relationship working with them. It does limit us though, because they actually it's been a really unique challenge because Mountains Walking specializes in IPAs.
Doesn't everyone?
And so, we're when we were first doing this and reading your zine, and it was like coming up, I was like, oh my God, like IPAs are going to be tough.
Mhm.
They're going to be challenging to make chocolates to pair with it. And somehow we've done three pairings there with, made for 12 different chocolates. And we have managed to like pick one IPA per flight. We've picked picked through their menu and found three beers that were not IPAs and really tried to highlight those. And but we always branch out and try to find an IPA because we're like, oh man, this is gonna be fun.
Yeah, it proves to be a fun challenge.
Yeah. So yeah. So like, I'd be so curious to, and so I think it'd be so fun to work with another brewery or work, start thinking about other beers and other styles that we can play around with. Because I mean, you talk about like Belgian beers, and we don't really have access to those. And I think that would just using Belgian beers to try to pair chocolate would be so fun.
Yeah, for sure. Well, talking about IPAs, that leads us into the next bar I wanted to look at, the Orange Thyme White Chocolate. So when I opened the box that you sent, I was looking at the bars before I looked at the note that you included with it, where you mentioned your pairings. And I got to that bar, I'm like, oh, this is going to be perfect with a hazy IPA. It's
Yeah.
just right for it. And then I was very happy to see in your note that that's what you paired it with. So tell us a little bit about that beer and then how that pairing worked out.
Well, David, everything we learned came from you, so it makes
Thank you.
sense.
Thank you.
That one was because I mean, I think, yeah, I want to say, I mean, because you suggested a white chocolate. I think in New Zealand it was like a citrusy white chocolate, perhaps. And so we were like, okay, obviously we have to do a citrusy white chocolate. I actually want to say maybe it was J. Coco's Orange Blossom White that might have gone with an IPA.
Sure, maybe.
I'm digging
Maybe.
deep
Yeah.
here.
Or like the pine.
Yeah. I usually like a little citrus and then the herbal component in
Yeah.
particular, or like tea, botanicals, herbs, something like that to balance out the
Yeah.
fruit that's already in the hop flavor.
Yep.
Yep. So yeah, we took that and we made the white chocolate with orange, and then it was giving us, a reminder of like an old fashioned with the orange. And then I thought back to a bar I used to, or a restaurant I used to work at that would make an old fashioned and they would garnish with thyme. And I was like, okay, that
Let's try it
settles
out.
it. Let's try this out. And so we
Yeah.
added dried thyme into into the melange and ground it into the chocolate, and it was subtle. I mean, it was cool because it turned it green.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's very stunning
Visually
Yeah.
looking.
adds a
Another
lot.
visually arresting bar.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we love the color of the green bar with the orange slices on the bar as well. So you could such good contrast between those two. But then when you ate the chocolate first, you got the orange, you got the creaminess of the white chocolate. But then when you took the sip of the hazy IPA, it just like turned the key on this herbaceous time. Like it was so cool to see how you didn't pick up on a ton of time when you had the bar,
Hmm.
but then when you had a sip of beer, it was just like,
Yeah.
but not like overwhelming.
With those citrusy hops, it just snaps into focus. I always include a pairing like this when I'm doing a pairing, just because, for one thing, it's amazing. It tastes awesome, but also
Yeah.
people are not expecting an IPA to work, like you were mentioning.
Exactly.
When you
Yeah.
put it with a bar like this, it just gets people's attention.
Yeah. And I think that's what has been really cool about doing these pairings at Mountains Walking is so many people would come up to us and they say, I don't like IPAs. I've had hazy IPAs. I've tried a bunch of IPAs. I don't usually go for IPAs, but I really liked that IPA with that chocolate. And people were saying that was my favorite, and I don't even like IPAs. And that is really cool to us
Mhm.
that we get to allow people to try something that we get to make and help them explore their palate and have like a refresher on, hey, this is a different way to taste this. Maybe you like it in this context and you didn't
Mhm.
even know that. So,
Yeah, I think something similar can happen with sours. You mentioned really liking them. Some people
yeah,
really don't, but with the right
yeah,
Definitely.
pairing, it can change their mind.
yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's happened time and time again. Yeah, so many people that would come to these events found them unique enough to get them there despite not really enjoying beer. They were just intrigued by the idea, so they were like, I will give it a shot. And then we were throwing beers at them that were I mean, they were on a flight, so they didn't have a choice. So,
Right.
they were like along for the ride, whether they wanted to be or not. And yeah, the response was so cool to see how something like chocolate with this, you know, thing that they thought they didn't like, beer, could unlock this whole other world and introduce a new experience with beer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, now we move into the dark chocolates that you sent. So the next one was the fig and cherry dark chocolate. I don't have the percentage in front of me on that, but tell me a little bit about that bar and then the pairing that you designed with.
We'll be right back.
Hey everyone. You may have noticed things in the world aren't awesome right now, and social media kind of reflects that. I built a lot of the following for Bean to Barstool and just for my own writing career on Instagram, but I've been getting significantly lower returns in terms of engagement on Instagram, and well, some of their recent changes don't have me thrilled for the future. So, here are some ways to keep up with Bean to Barstool if Instagram and other social media platforms don't prove to be long-term viable solutions. If you do nothing else, sign up for the Bean to Barstool newsletter. You can do that by going to beantobarstool.com/newsletter-signup. That link is in the show notes. That is a weekly email newsletter that covers all the same things we cover here on the podcast. Speaking of, subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Wherever you listen to Bean to Barstool, go there and subscribe to make sure you get notifications of new episodes. If you're a proud millennial like me and you still use an RSS feeder, you can also subscribe to our blog posts, which come out at least weekly. Also, if you are still on social media but don't love Meta right now, you can check me out over on Blue Sky. I'm on there under my personal account at David Nilsson Beer, but I do post all the Bean to Barstool content over there as well. Finally, if you want to get in touch with me directly, you can email beantobarstool@gmail.com. I am not leaving Instagram anytime soon, but these are great ways to make sure you can keep up with what I have going on. Stay safe and take care of each other.
This was an inspiration from the pairing that you suggested, which was, yeah, this is all from you, David. So you did a Omegang's
Oh, the berry patch?
the Berry Patch beer, phenomenal beer. And you suggested pairing it with a spicy cherry dark chocolate bar. And I will say that one scrambled our brains and made like that was the pairing to us that made us realize that there was like the third or like the fifth dimension of pairing, that you could experience a chocolate bar on its own, you could experience a beer on its own, but when you put them together, you experience something completely new. That was the pairing that like sent us to the moon. So we took that inspiration and we thought about we made a 72% dark chocolate. So, and it was a blend. We were making a house blend at the time that was a 50% Ecuador bean. So you got this really nice, just like classic chocolatey, fudgy flavor. And then we did a 30%. We were getting beans from Sierra Leone at the time. So the Sierra Leone beans added this like really earthy, mushroomy, like deep, rich chocolate flavor. And then 20% from the Dominican Republic from Zorzal. So we got this like bright cherry citrus, like a much more elevated, or like give you a little bit of a lift to the chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
So we had this house blend. Then we added the dried fruit. So we added dried cherries. We grow some of the best cherries in Montana. They're flathead cherries. They are, when I first moved to Montana, that was like it stole my heart. And so we were able to get dried flathead cherries from a small producer in Northwest Montana. And then we wanted to continue on this jammy, like sultry, dark fruit train. And so we thought of adding figs to it and wanted to see how it would play. And I'm trying to, what did we pair with that? I'm trying to, it was
So
sour.
So-
yeah.
What you sent me was the huckleberry sour.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's the huckleberry sour.
Yeah, which if you've ever been to Montana, that is like the pride and joy of the foraging here
I didn't know
is the huckleberry fruit. And so we went kind of full Montana with the pairing with the Montana cherries. I'm pretty sure they make the huckleberry sour also with regionally picked huckleberries. I don't know where they buy them from, but yeah, so we just went full Montana with it.
If
Yeah.
anyone listening is not familiar with huckleberry, how would you distinguish it from other berries?
It is like it's a tiny, tiny blueberry that is more, how do you describe the flavor of a huckleberry?
Yeah, we should. I'm just gonna see what it says.
What does the internet recommend? It's
Huckleberry.
almost like
It's like
more like cotton candy flavored blueberry, or like
but with like a more tartness. This is how I feel when I'm trying to describe a kumquat. I'm just like, it's a mix of a bunch of things.
yeah,
Huckleberry flavor.
yeah. David, have you ever had a huckleberry?
I have, yeah. It's been a little while, I will confess.
Yeah, they. I mean,
Yeah, I would say a huckleberry flavor is like a jam-packed blueberry. It's like a blueberry concentrate with a little bit more tart to it. And the color on the inside is much more of like this really purple, juicy. Like if you thought of like a really ripe raspberry and then that concentration of color, but like more purple, that's what it would.
yeah. If you could
Feel
like
like.
describe the flavor of purple.
Well, I guess that fits. I mean, my memory of it is that it had a bit of a Venice quality to it, like a Pinot Noir note within that blueberry,
Yeah.
like a little bit
Yeah.
richer. Yeah.
More, yeah, it's more full. Like it's like that, it's really jam-packed in there, that flavor and that little berry.
So was the sour that they made with this more sweet, more dry? What were we looking at there?
It was not so sweet. I would say it's like somewhere in between sweet and dry on this one, and it wasn't. I think the nice thing about the huckleberry sour that they made, it wasn't like overly sour either. Like it didn't just like totally whack you in the face, but it did create that mouth-watering experience that would allow you to balance out the darkness of the chocolate and this, the acidity of the beer kind of it tamped down the tannins in the dark chocolate and allowed you to really like move on to the fruit. It was like this, you know, the chocolate kind of moved to the back, and then the cherries and the figs can take off a little bit towards the end. But yeah, no, it's a really yummy beer. It's really balanced. We've had some sours that are like really sour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't had a huckleberry sour in so long. I would really need to crack one open right
Yeah.
now and give it a
Sounds like a
taste.
good time for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I always love pairing sours, as you know, with bars that have dried fruit because it feels like it just reinflates the fruit,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that
Yep.
acidity sells the fruit character so well.
Yep.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's talk about the chai rose dark chocolate because as soon as I saw that one, I was like, that could be a potential challenge. Just looking at the description and the ingredients in there, rose on its own can be so particular and sometimes can be kind of sharp. Chai spices, depending on how they're handled, can be kind of tricky. When I saw your recommendation or what you went with of the peach cobbler sour, that immediately sounded right to me. That I could see that because you need a fruit character that is going to be able to kind of absorb all those sharp angles, and peach is one of those. It's kind of a soft flavor, it's not competing with those others. Tell us a little bit about the beer and how you landed on that particular pairing.
Yeah, that beer is part of Mountains Walking's dessert cart series. And so they do these series where they make higher percentage beers they try to inspire them by local flavors. And that beer in particular was inspired by a peach cobbler from a local bakery down the street. And I think they brewed it with oats and they also brewed it with
Sure,
lactose
yeah.
to make it creamier. So with the sourness of that beer, it was also had this really full body like creaminess,
Mm,
which when we were drinking that beer, and the way we do a lot of our kind of discovering for pairings, which I'm sure can do something similar at home. You have
mm.
just like a box of a gazillion chocolate bars
Uh-huh.
and you have and you just start taking them out and trying different sips with different bites of all different makers, all different flavors. And one of the ones that we tried that we really liked, the first one we tried was I believe it was a Mirazam bar and it was one of their rose bars and it
Oh,
was
sure.
just a rose dark chocolate and something about that floral note which was very soft in the bar that they make just added to that creaminess and that like what you're describing, that soft peach flavor. It was kind of, yeah, giving that like the floral fruit was really coming out. And in that beer, it's just brewed with so many like warm baking spices to
Mhm.
emulate that peach cobbler flavor. And so we were thinking of, what could complement that. And we're really lucky because we have some friends from the farmers market. It's actually a farm with a stall set up next to ours who make this wonderfully spicy, delicious chai that
Mm.
they serve in and hot chai at the farmers market. And so we had tried that and we always knew we wanted to incorporate their chai into a chocolate bar. And so we just kind of had this moment of like, we have this chai, this rose is really working. Let's see if we can mix this in like a little bowl with some dark chocolate and see if all these flavors would work for us. And so, yeah, that's kind of just how we came up with it.
Yeah,
What do you want to
and
add?
the dark chocolate, like the fig and cherry, was it made sense to pair with the sour because the dark chocolate, dark, especially higher percentage, 70 and up, or, around that can just play so well with the sour. So it made sense to make a dark chocolate that could go with the sour. And yeah, I mean all the spices and the rose really, I mean this particular beer, it was good. I mean this was one in the flight. This was one of those beers that I think it might have been like 10%, was not something that people would just like be drinking casually.
Right.
And these were all 2 ounce pours, I believe, or 4 ounce pours, 4 ounce pours. And it did give people a chance to tiptoe into a higher percentage beer with a chocolate like this that could really balance out the alcohol and like the intensity of flavors. But I mean both the chocolate and the beer were intense. Like these were very strong flavored. So with the beer being so strong, we had to make a chocolate that had a strong flavor as well. So
Yeah.
that's what we did.
When I tasted that bar, I was surprised that the baking spices felt like they kind of led the way. The rose was what don't want to say worried about, but what I was expecting to be the big outlier in there. And it's
Hmm.
really much more supportive. You're
Yeah.
getting like clove and cinnamon that are really leading the way, which makes perfect sense with a dessert themed beer like a peach cobbler.
Yeah. And we really wanted that to be chai forward and that the floral notes were really like aromatic. So to do that, we ground rose petals with cane sugar, sprinkled that on the back for some texture, and then also sprinkled those rose petals on top. So it was really like when you're first picking it up and inspecting this bar, you're just getting that scent of rose. And then as you're eating it, you're getting more of that chai forward to match.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
and I think that bar came together. We wanted initially to put the rose in the chocolate. And I guess I think Mirzam did that.
That's what Mirzam did, I
I
think.
think they used oh, you know what? That's what we did. So I remember we were
We did that
buying
first.
rose oil and putting it, and it was like, I think, David, what you're talking about it was too rosy, and it does get dangerous. I think especially for American palates, especially for Montana American palates, rose can be like alarming and just be a little too grandma perfume. And so we tried that at first. And so like not only was it like overly rosy, but it was also like crazy expensive to be buying all this rose oil. And so so we dialed it back and just went with putting it on the back to, I mean, we love the way it looked, first of all. So, I mean, it was another visual element. So we loved the way it looked, but it just gave you it was just the idea of rose. It wasn't like rose in your face. It was like, I see the rose, I smell the rose, but like you were saying, it's a supporting character. And then adding the cane sugar on the back with the rose ground up, it did add a little bit more rose, but it was really more visual to make the bar sparkle, to make it feel a little bit more special and unique. And like be able to just be more balanced and not, scare people away.
Let's talk about what I think is probably my favorite standalone bar from what you said, which is the Tiramisu Dark. Just to taste on its own, hats off to you. This is a perfect bar. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Uh, Everybody makes a coffee bar, and I really like coffee chocolate.
Yeah.
So like most of them I find are enjoyable. This one really nails its concept well. Tell us a little bit about the coffee you used in there and what else went into creating the tiramisu concept.
Yeah, to start, just the inspiration for the bar. I had been on Instagram and I just saw so much content about tiramisu. Like tiramisu, people making it, restaurants having tiramisu drawers. It just seemed like tiramisu was kind of having this renaissance for like restaurants and I don't know, people making it at home. And I love tiramisu. So my immediate thought when I see a dessert that I'm like, ooh, is how do we make that into a chocolate bar? And so I kind of said that to Greg. I think we should make a tiramisu chocolate bar. And Greg was like, okay, that's perfect. Let's do it. He loves also coffee. Greg worked in, as he said, coffee for a while. And the coffee we ended up getting came from Studio Coffee in Bozeman. What is the coffee exactly? Do you remember?
So it's a yeah, it's a decaf coffee. It's from it's a Mexico from Chiapas, I'm pretty sure, and it just is this chocolatey, like deep, rich, classic, like a very cozy cup of coffee. I mean, it's one of the best decafs I've ever had. And she uses Noelle, who owns Studio. She roasts with decaf. It's not Swiss water process. It's not they use, I think it's like ethylene gas. I might be using the wrong term. It's some kind of gas that just naturally removes the caffeine. So it's chemical free, is like very clean decaf espresso that we get from her. So that's the coffee that we use for it. And we've strong, Studio Coffee has been such a mentor for us, and we're very proud and very excited to be able to use her coffee in this chocolate bar.
Yeah, there's a very subtle like Nilla wafer type flavor in there. I don't know exactly what you're crumbling up to give that lady fingers impression, but what were you using there?
So yeah, on the top, it's actually ground lady
Lady
fingers.
fingers.
Okay.
So
Okay,
yep.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, so we thought that it would be fun, with classic tiramisu. The chocolate element, for the most part, is on top with like chocolate shavings or chocolate cocoa powder on it. And we thought it would be fun to kind of like reverse the idea and have ground lady fingers instead of within, dusted on top, mixed with cocoa powder. So you still, like you said, get that wafery, you still get that kind of like really like bakey, crummy flavor to it.
And you paired this with a porter, which when most people are thinking about pairing chocolate with beer, they're thinking porter or stout because of that, chocolatey, roasty flavor in there. What made you go with the porter specifically with this bar?
We were thinking this was our fourth chocolate on the pairing. We were thinking dessert. We were thinking after dinner, tiramisu, espresso, coffee, into the meal.
Finisher.
It was the best option that we had to pair it for the experience. And I think I would love to try this chocolate with something like an oatmeal stout that maybe had a bigger body to it and maybe less of a hop character. I think the porter that we used for this had a stronger hop character and a lighter body. And I think it was a really good pairing. We loved it. I think I would just be curious to try it with something that was a little more full
Sure.
with this pairing.
What immediately I was thinking of when I tasted this was a pumpkin ale
Mm.
or something
Ooh,
with maple in it, maple sugar, maple syrup. I think
Yum.
either of those
nice.
would pair beautifully. Obviously,
Yeah.
depending on the base style, but I love pumpkin or pumpkin spice with coffee.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
always is a happy space for me. And I think with this bar in particular, you've got a little bit of like a burnt caramel macchiato flavor to
Yeah.
the espresso in there, and I think that would work just so well with the underlying sweetness in the beer.
That's such a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there's something really great about this chocolate is we use cream cheese powder in it, which had a pretty decent amount of salt.
Hmm.
So that really, I think
Mhm.
for us, as we were like tasting through the process of making it and iterating on it, we're really enjoying how like what the salt content was doing for the coffee flavor and for just the chocolate flavor itself. I forget which origin of beans we used.
It was actually a mix. It was a 50-50 blend of Dominican Zorzal and Ghana's Three Mountain Cocoa. So it was a nice split between this like shortbready, cocoa powdery, very like low acidity chocolate from Ghana, and then paired with a higher acidity, more like spiced cocoa from the from Zorzal.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just kind of gave like a nice balanced backbone to this chocolate, you know, and Then we layered everything else on top of that. We tried to find mascarpone powder. I don't know. Do you already say this?
No,
We tried, we were like searching high and low for mascarpone powder, but it does not exist.
they don't dry that in the United States.
Ah, yeah. Yeah, I'm surprised you got cream cheese powder. I haven't worked with that.
Yeah, that was a fun
Same.
one. Yeah.
That's super fun.
Well, what are some other pairing ideas or bar concepts that you've got bouncing around that you want to try?
Oh, the bar concepts. Gosh, we have so many. I would have to pull up a document. They're escaping me at the moment.
I know. We kind of like escape into dormancy, like we crawl back into our hovel when we do these pairings and we go crazy and we come up with these great pairings and then we kind of retreat back into like regular chocolate making mode. But I think our next like phase and what we want to think about doing is going to be just trying to figure out ways to incorporate more local ingredients. Montana is a interesting place. It's very, very short growing season. But we get a ton of fruit. I mean, we grow a ton of fruit. There's whether it's wild or it's grown. And I think there's a unique way to incorporate more fruit. But then, I mean, I personally want to try to figure out ways to incorporate things like chickpeas. And I mean, Montana grows a bunch of chickpeas.
I did not know that.
Mhm.
Yeah, they grow a ton of chickpeas. In Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, like grow basically all the chickpeas in the United States. And so we have chickpeas, we have flax, we have
You got
a
a
lot
lot
of
of
great.
malt. You got a lot of
We
barley.
got
We
exactly.
got
We
a
have a
lot of
lot of
malt.
barley. We have a lot of malt. So we want to think about
Yep.
introducing some malt into our chocolate, and that was actually one that we played around with early on.
Yep. Yeah,
Was
there's
trying to incorporate malt,
yeah,
and
great malt place close to us.
yeah, yeah, about like 45 minutes away from us. There's a malt house, and yeah, I don't know as far as like pairings and what we're thinking about.
Yeah, I think for pairings, I mean, we have been so lucky to work with Mountains Walking on doing trying so many different things with their beers and being able to explore IPAs. And I think we want to, like Greg was saying, like with our tiramisu bar, it would be great to just try some new things, try some things with some other local breweries and see what else, what other local breweries have to offer for pairing with different styles of chocolate as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I mean,
we're
we're
thinking about that.
we're also just we're getting into summer and we're just kind of ramping things up to prepare for summer season. And I mean, summer in Montana is really a busy time, big tourist season, and that's kind of like when people come out of the woodworks. A lot of places are closed for the winter, and so it's I think right now we're really just like focusing on our operations and continuing to make what we make. I think as the year progresses and as we get closer to the fall, we'll start thinking about our next pairing ideas and thinking about our next events.
Yeah. But one pairing I want to bring up because you mentioned how much you love pumpkin, and we haven't made this chocolate in a while, but we have made a pumpkin spiced
Oh yeah.
dark milk chocolate with our own blend of a pumpkin spice blend and with real pumpkin and with toasted sunflower seeds on the back. And when we use that in a pairing, we actually paired that with an IPA, Mountains Walking's Damselfly IPA,
Hmm.
which I'm trying to remember more about that beer. That was
I think it's a pale ale
over,
actually.
oh, pale ale.
Yeah.
That was like over a year ago.
How did that taste together?
Oh man. I mean, same thing. We had so many people that came up and they were like, I hate IPAs. And then they would have that pairing and it did the same thing. It
Yeah.
allowed them to enjoy the IPA. We were able to like manage this like the combination of the sweetness of the chocolate with like the sweetness, the creaminess and the spice all like allowed the bitterness of the IPA to like settle down a little bit. It kind of put a little blanket over it and said to, be quiet for just a moment. It was neat to see how the spice in that chocolate. And I will say also I think this was a big component of it was that we had salted toasted pepitas on the back of the bar as well
Mm.
that were actually quite plentiful.
Yeah.
So you got the salt and the fat and the nuttiness of
Nuttiness.
the pepitas that also really just rounded out the flavors of the pale ale.
Sure. Yeah, that makes
Um,
sense.
and
That's a really interesting pairing. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember how we thought about it because we were really trying to highlight the idea of like cloves and warm baking spices growing in warmer climate regions and
Mhm.
how a lot of the flavors of the beer it's escaping me what the flavors were, but how they were also grown in warm tropical regions and that you might think a pumpkin spice, oh, that's fall,
Hmm.
yes, but those spices naturally come from a warm place, so they do fit within that world of, different tropical fruits and tropical spices, and they can
Yeah.
really come together.
That's a really interesting concept. I'm actually working on an article that'll hopefully be coming out later this year on that juxtaposition of where so many of those ingredients are grown and what we have kind of done with them in connotation of making them these comforting winter, fall flavors. But I mean, cacao, first and foremost, chocolate
Yeah,
is such a comforting flavor to us, but this is an equatorial crop.
yeah,
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 it's really
absolutely. Yeah.
interesting.
absolutely. Yep.
That's cool. I can't wait to read that when that
Yeah,
comes out.
I just have to write it now. What story are you telling with Front Porch Chocolate?
We're telling the story of an approachable entry point into craft chocolate. I think our goal is to make chocolate that is familiar. So if somebody sees a tiramisu bar, they know what a tiramisu is. But when they taste it, it's something brand new. And we are telling the story of a relaxed, fun, engaging time with chocolate that you can enjoy with your chocolate, but you can enjoy it in your normal life too. Like you can experience these things and be relaxed and have a good time with friends and whoever, or just by yourself. I think is, kind of the story that we like to tell.
Yeah, and we like to really share with people the creativity of chocolate and the creativity of eating and flavors, and that we find that to be like our art form is making chocolate, and it is really slow and it doesn't have to be fast moving, and hopefully that gives people a feeling and a sense that wherever they can find their creativity, it doesn't have to be fast and it doesn't have to produce a lot, and it can just be for fun and enjoyment, and you can have a good time doing it.
Yeah, and you can do things like, drink beer and eat chocolate.
Exactly.
And it doesn't have to be so serious.
It doesn't have to be
Major,
serious.
major selling point for sure.
Yeah.
I think thinking about, like there's no rules really. I mean, we're lucky to live in Montana. There's not a lot of rules when it comes to food and sports teams allegiances, and people are kind of finding their own path in Montana. And I think we've seen that just in the food here, and doing things like what you're promoting with beer and chocolate. It makes perfect sense to break the mold a little bit and think about new ways to experience things in a way that is not intimidating, and you can do very casually or on your own time.
Since talking with Greg and T, I've taken these pairings for test drives with pretty encouraging results. I paired the strawberry lemon white chocolate bar with two different beers. The first was Esoteric Ethereal, a Belgian pale ale brewed in Cincinnati, brewed with basil. And the lemon in the bar kind of receded to an accent with this pairing, and the strawberry and the basil came to the forefront. But the overall presentation is still light and creamy and airy. Following on the pairing that they did with a classic lager, I also paired the bar with Hop Dissertation, which is a West Coast Pilsner collab between Branch and Bone and Derive, who are both Ohio breweries as well. And this was awesome. The strawberry and tropical fruit smoothie notes kind of led the way, but without being too sweet. Not overly complicated, but still really surprising. Really enjoyed that pairing. The white chocolate with thyme and orange zest was just born to pair with a hazy IPA, and I tested this one more just for enjoyment, knowing it would work already. The only hazy I had on hand was Burial's Those Two Afraid to Never Be Remarkable, which is actually a triple IPA, but it's gentle enough to work for our purposes here, and it was fantastic with this bar. Seriously, just do yourself a favor and pair a white chocolate with herbs or tea or other botanicals with a hazy IPA. It's awesome. The chai rose bar was the one I was most concerned about out of this set, but I followed Greg and T's lead here and paired it with a peach sour, and it was maybe my favorite pairing of all of these bars. The beer I had on hand wasn't really the same format as the one they worked with, but still had peach in the forefront, which was the key. It was also from Burial. This was the Separation of Light and Darkness. It's an oak-aged blonde sour with Carolina peaches, and it's quite dry and acidic with lemon notes and a lot of minerality, but all of that softens into this raw red peach flesh in a really kind of delicate way. I paired it with the chai rose bar, and a fascinating confectionery foundation kind of played out from that. It's like ginger snap cookies almost. And then the spices layered over that barely ripe peach flavor and created almost like a peach cobbler profile, but without the same sweetness. It was just a gorgeous pairing. The Tiramisu bar, which was my favorite of these bars on its own, has been tough to find a solid pairing for, largely because I don't have a porter or stout on hand with enough sweetness in the body and low enough roast. Both the American Porter and Imperial Stout I paired it with have too much roast and too much bitterness, and they clashed with the coffee notes. So I'm going to try to track down a better pairing candidate for this bar soon. And then finally, the Fig and Cherry bar was just a home run with a Flanders Red Ale, which I already knew it was going to be. Dry, dark fruit inclusions are just born to pair with this tart and lightly sweet style, with the acidity and the malt flavor of the beer breathing life into the fruit of the bar. Perfect. It works over and over again. So any kind of bar like this, whether it's this Fig and Cherry bar, Mocha Origins has a great cherry bar, pair them with a Flanders Red Ale, and it's always going to work. You can find the link to the Front Porch website to order these bars and learn more about the company, as well as their Instagram account in the show notes. I'll drop all the links there. I got back a couple weeks ago from the Craft Brewers Conference in Indianapolis, which is the largest annual conference and trade show for the Brewers Association. It moves around every year, and I don't always attend, but Indy is close enough to me to run over for the week. On the trade show, I tried a beer brewed with a new line of products called Flava Malt, which is malt that is sprayed with natural flavor compounds after malting. I was a bit skeptical here. They had a beer made with chocolate raspberry malt, which, again, this is just malt that has been sprayed with natural flavors to make it taste like chocolate raspberry. And I had an extended conversation with several reps that revealed that they didn't really know what cacao had been used or even if cacao had been used. The beer tasted all right, though it was tough to gauge the chocolate character with the raspberry overriding it. I remain quite skeptical, and I encourage them to find out where their ingredients are from and why that matters, especially with chocolate. So if I find out more about this, I will let you know. I also spent some time with a friend of mine who is a rep for Abstracts, which is a company making hop, hemp, and botanically derived flavor products for dosing beer, all using terpenes and other natural botanical compounds. They're doing some really cool stuff here. She sent me home with some samples, and I made a hard hot chocolate using Diego's dark milk chocolate, and I dosed it with a few drops of the pineapple flavor sample before adding some Plantation 3 Stars white rum, and it was fantastic, and I will be doing more of this. Finally, a quick PSA on something I've been seeing a lot of on social media recently that bothers me. I've been seeing a lot of folks in the chocolate space using AI-generated art for their posts, and I really want to encourage you guys to think about this more. First of all, AI-generated artwork and writing is terrible for the environment because of the data processing centers that are required to create this stuff. Looking at cacao and how dependent it is on a healthy planet, this is not a great decision for craft chocolate folks. But additionally, beyond that, the programs that generate this art or writing are trained on the creative work and intellectual property of other artists and writers without their permission. I know one popular trend recently has been using AI to create artwork that looks like the animation from Studio Ghibli out of Japan. Hayao Miyazaki from Studio Ghibli has been adamant in opposing the use of his work in training these models. Artists and writers make their living, our living, on our creative work, on our intellectual work. And when AI is used to spoof that, it's just stealing that property without any permission, without any compensation. I've seen some people argue that this is democratizing art, and I think that's an absurd argument. If I come into your chocolate shop and steal your chocolate and then go back to my house and melt that down and create my own chocolate bars and then put it out as my work, I have not democratized the chocolate making process. I've just stolen your chocolate bars. Please, now more than ever, support actual human artists and writers and creative people. All right, that's the end of my rant and my PSA. Thanks to Greg and T for coming on the show today. Thank you, as always, to all of you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Bean to Barstool, and I will see you in the next episode. Cheers.